The roar of 50,000 people shakes the sand beneath your feet. Across the arena stands the man who taught you how to hold a sword when your hands were still shaking too hard to grip one properly. The man who shared his bread with you when you were too injured to earn your own ration. The man who has, more than once, talked you through the nights when you were certain you wouldn't survive until morning. You know his strengths. He knows yours. You've sparred against each other 100 times in training, always stopping short, always pulling the blow at the last second. There is no stopping short today. In a few moments, only one of you is walking out of this arena alive. And neither of you asked for this. Neither of you chose it. Somebody else, a man who isn't even in this arena, decided that today, your friendship becomes a performance for people who paid to watch it end in blood. Rewind 2 years. You weren't always this. Before the sand and the crowd and the sword calluses, you were a free man with a family, a debt you couldn't pay, and a decision that felt at the time like your only option. Or maybe you didn't have a choice at all. Captured in a war you didn't start, sold to a man who saw value in your size and your strength, and marched into a compound you'd heard about only in whispered rumors. Either way, the outcome is the same. You now belong to a lanista, a man who buys, trains, and sells human beings for a living, and whose entire business model depends on turning you into something the crowd will pay to watch. You expected brutality. You didn't expect what actually breaks you first. The compound you're brought to is called a ludus, part prison, part training academy, part investment property, because that's exactly what you are now. An investment. Dormitories, training yards, even a small infirmary, all built around a singular purpose, turning raw, terrified recruits into fighters worth paying to see. Your days begin before sunrise and don't end until well after dark. You train with wooden swords weighted twice as heavy as the real blade you'll eventually carry, so that a real sword will feel almost light by comparison. Your diet is barley, beans, and dried fruit, cheap, filling, and specifically designed to put muscle and fat on your frame, because a gladiator who looks strong sells more tickets than one who looks like he's starving. Discipline here is absolute. Minor mistakes earn you a beating. Serious ones can get you killed before you ever step into the arena at all. And somewhere in this brutal, exhausting routine, something happens that you never expected. You start to actually care about the men around you. Here's the part almost nobody explains about this life. The men in your ludus become your family. Not by choice, not out of comfort, but because you eat together, bleed together, and face death together every single day. This bond even has a name, your familia, the gladiators call it, and it becomes the only real relationship you're allowed to hold on to in a life where nothing else is yours. There's the training partner who talks you through your first serious injury. The veteran who survived a dozen fights and quietly teaches you the tricks that keep men alive past their first year. The recruit who arrived the same week you did, equally terrified, equally lost, who has slowly become the closest thing to a brother you have left in the world. The lanista notices this bond forming too. And he doesn't leave it to chance. He has a rule about it, one specifically designed to make sure the bonds you're forming never become dangerous to him. Men who speak the same language, who come from the same region, who might have any reason to trust each other more than they trust their masters, they're deliberately kept apart during training. It's not paranoia. It's precedent. Decades earlier, gladiators from these very schools once banded together tightly enough to lead a rebellion that shook the entire republic to its core, and every lanista since has lived in quiet fear of the same thing happening again. So your bonds are allowed to form, but only up to a point. Deep enough that you fight harder to protect your familia's reputation. Never deep enough to become a threat to the men who own you. You don't fully understand this rule yet. You will. Because the moment is coming when the bond you've built with your closest friend in this world becomes the exact thing the lanista intends to profit from. Your first fight in the arena isn't against your friend. It's against a stranger, another gladiator from a rival school, someone you've never met and likely never will again. The fight is fast, brutal, and over before you fully process what's happening. You survive. He doesn't. You expect to feel triumphant. Instead, you feel hollow, standing in the sand while 50,000 strangers cheer for something that, to you, was the worst moment of your life. Back at the ludus that night, it's your familia who gets you through it. The same men who trained beside you, who understand exactly what you're feeling because every one of them has felt it too. For the first time, you understand exactly why these bonds exist. They're not a weakness the lanista tolerates. They're the only thing making this life survivable at all. Which makes what happens next feel less like bad luck, and more like a betrayal built into the very structure of your life. Months pass. You fight again. You survive again. Your reputation grows, and so does your friends. The same recruit who arrived the same week you did, who has become, in every way that matters, your brother. Then the lanista calls you both in together, and delivers the news with the same flat businesslike tone he uses for everything. The crowd wants something special for the next games. Two rising fighters from the same school, known to be close, pitted against each other for the very first time. The novelty alone will sell out the arena. You stare at your friend. He stares back at you. Neither of you says anything, because there's nothing to say. Refusing isn't an option that exists for men like you. The date is already set. You have weeks left before you're forced to face the one person in this entire brutal world you've never wanted to hurt. You keep training together in the weeks that follow, because there's nothing else to do. It's almost unbearable, sparring against the exact hands and instincts you've come to know as well as your own, both of you fully aware that in a matter of weeks, you'll be doing this for real, in front of a crowd that has paid specifically to see it not be a sparring match anymore. Neither of you talks about what happens if you win. Neither of you talks about what happens if you lose. Some nights, you simply sit together in silence, because after everything you've survived side by side, silence is the only honest thing left to share. The morning of the fight arrives whether you're ready for it or not. And in the arena, one small, unwritten rule of this brutal world is about to decide whether this ends in a funeral, or something else entirely. The fight begins, and every instinct you've spent 2 years building takes over. You know his strengths. He knows yours. The crowd expects a bloodbath, but what they get instead is something closer to a conversation between two men who know each other too well to be surprised by anything the other does. You fight hard enough to satisfy the crowd, because a fight that looks half-hearted risks both your lives. But there's an unspoken rule in this world that the audience rarely understands: victory doesn't always require death. A gladiator who fights bravely and yields can be spared by the crowd itself. A raised hand, a turned thumb, a decision made by thousands of strangers who, for one afternoon, hold both your lives in their palms. You land the blow that ends the match. Your friend goes down, defeated but alive, and looks up, not at you but past you to the crowd, waiting to learn his fate. The crowd roars for mercy. You lower your sword. Your friend lives. And for one afternoon, in a world built entirely to turn friendship into spectacle, the bond survives anyway. You know it won't always end this way. You've heard the stories of men who weren't so fortunate, familia broken apart by the sand instead of saved by it. But today, walking out of the arena side by side with a man who taught you how to survive this life in the first place, you let yourself believe, just for now, that some things this world tries to destroy simply refuse to break. You spent your life being told the men beside you were your family, right up until the moment they were ordered to become your executioner instead. And somehow, impossibly, the bond survived the very system built to test it.